All right, good evening, everybody. So my name is Dan Burgon. I'm the BI manager at the Berry Group. If you haven't heard of the Berry Group before, you might have seen the new adverts that we've got out over the festive season involving kind of pink flamingos. Here's what we're going to cover this evening. I'm going to begin just by some brief introductions, introducing the Berry Group as a company, and then who we are as a BI team and how we're set up. Then we're going to talk about a few of the things that we've recently implemented at the Berry Group to kind of advance the ways that we work with Power BI. So that's external sharing. So that's sharing Power BI reports with external partners by allowing them to log into our tenant through Active Directory. And then also this concept of a data lab. Data lab's not kind of a Power BI term, but this is kind of the branding that we're using in the company. So Dan, who's with us, he'll talk about external sharing. Paul will talk about data labs, and then I'll wrap up with a few comments, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions as well. Okay, so who are we, first of all? So the Burgon Group. So we're an online retailer, but we're also a financial services provider. So our kind of USP is that we offer flexible ways to pay for our customers. And we're actually the largest in the UK that offers that combination of services. So those who are through our website, like Alex alluded to, the brands that we own are Very Island, and then also Littlewoods. But Very is kind of our flagship brand. Lots of good deals on, so go and check out the website.
Sell software.
Yeah. This is how we're set up as a BI team. So as I mentioned, so I'm the BI manager, and our team's split in two. So we have some UK-based colleagues and some colleagues based out in India. So we've got Paul and Dan who'll be speaking today, but then also we've got Annie, Chris, Matt, Liam, Sakshi, Abdullah, Devender, and Savishi. So the guys in India do a really great job for us. They kind of align their working hours with ours, and because we're all used to remote working now, it works really well. We also have so my team, we take care of developing the Power BI reports and also data pipeline processes that go along with it that feed the reports. We also have a service delivery team, and their function is to manage Power BI from a platform admin point of view, and also the pipelines as well. So they take care of all the scheduling and maintenance. So the way we work together is we develop things and then hand it across to them. And they also manage kind of our wider user community as well. So that team is headed up by Pete. And then we have Tip and Ellie, they're with us as well tonight. They're also reporting into Pete. They're grads, they're actually doing some rotations around other teams as well. So my team, we develop what we call the enterprise reporting, so the trusted reporting that will be consumed by the whole business, if you like. But then there are various other pockets of users throughout the business that we support, and we allow them to develop stuff that's for their teams locally. So we have a warehouse operations team, which is probably the biggest team that do this kind of thing. But then there's also customer service, data science and analytics, credit risk, and a few others as well. This is the tech stack that we use. So Teradata and SAS there. They probably wouldn't be our first choice for data storage and data pipeline tools, but that's what the business uses. So that's what we use. And then obviously Power BI is our reporting tool. And then just a little bit about our usage and our journey with Power BI. So I've pulled some stats. So these are all from September this year. So we had just under 9,000 views, 564 unique users, 100 reports, and 15 workspaces. And then we've got some charts at the bottom there. So the one on the left is views. So we've got the dark pink is this year, and then the light pink is the previous year for comparison. And then likewise, we've got unique users on the right there. So this just illustrates that we are kind of growing the usage of our platform quite significantly. So you can see our year-on-year growth is pretty massive, and then also kind of the in-year trend is going up as well. So what are some of the things that we've implemented? So we started using Power BI in 2019. And for the people who were in the team at that time, the first thing we had to do was learn Power BI. So that's when I started to learn Power BI. I had more of a SaaS background before then. We had to develop the architecture, templates, governance processes, and I should say it wasn't myself that implemented these at the time. It's the person who is now my boss. Power BI drop-ins to support the wider user community. We transitioned from more of a very centralized team who would take requests from the business and try and prioritize themselves to more of a hub and spoke model where individual projects in the business will kind of bid for a Power BI developer to be assigned to that project or that squad. And they determine the workflow and we just determine how things are built and best practice. We started working with our guys in India. We migrated a bunch of legacy reports across to Power BI. We created something called the BI Hub, which is a Teams channel that contains links to all our reports as kind of a one-stop shop to help users explore our reporting. We built like a pound-euro switch into our reports as standard that allows people to click on a toggle and toggle the currencies between pound and euros so that the island part of the business can use our reports. And then finally, the two things we've implemented recently that we're going to talk about tonight. So the first one is, like I said, external sharing. So this was a request from a part of the business where obviously we partner with brands because we want to sell their products on our website. So people like Nike, Adidas, Ralph Lauren, and so forth. And they want data. They want to be able to see how their products are performing, and they wanted to build a dashboard that we could share with them so they could self-serve. And so Dan's going to talk through the process of how we did that. And there was a lot of different things that we had to consider. It wasn't just the technical process. There was a whole kind of business kind of process wrap that had to go around that and to make sure we did it in kind of a safe and robust way. And then Paul will talk about this concept of a data lab. So this is a large semantic model within Power BI that we load up with very granular data. So this is kind of to the level of like individual items on people's order. And then that allows us, to speed up development because developers can just plug straight into that data lab and all the hard work's been done for them, the incremental refresh, the DAX and so forth. But then it's also a foundation for us to open that up to business users so they can go in and if they don't exactly want to report, they just want to be able to slice and dice and get the data they want, then that provides the foundation for them to do that. So with that, I will hand you over to Dan.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, so as Dan mentioned, I was tasked with the external sharing portion of this presentation. So as many projects start out with, we started off with a meeting, and as Dan sort of alluded to, we had this idea that there were a number of external companies, all the brands that support our company. There were lots of data being shared with them by a lot of different people at different levels. And the teams that we met with just wanted to know, was there a better way we could do this? A huge number of like the buyers or the members of staff, they were sending information, just like Excel reports, emails. They might have been doing it weekly, daily, monthly, all that sort of stuff. The cadences were all over the place. So we really wanted to have an idea as to what sort of product we could provide for them and how we could assist with that. So the problem statement. Inconsistency across reports, as you can imagine. So many reports going out. They've all got different things in them. It'd be nice to have a consistent set of numbers and metrics going out to these brands. Many hours spent each week producing the reports. It was done manually. There was a case of pulling data out of multiple systems in some cases. Stitching it all together. It could take a couple of hours on a Monday morning every single week to get the data out. Then obviously there's the manual work. It's the amount of time it takes, and it can also result in errors. It's the human factor that has to be considered in all these things. And lastly, the dependence on key members of staff to ensure this is done consistently. All it takes is for one member of staff to be off, or to be on long-term leave or something like that, and some of these processes were in danger of falling over. So the report, we started discussing the report, and we started saying if we were going to build the report, what was the data that was actually going to be required to be on that report? So obviously there'd be a load of key metrics at the top, as you can imagine. The brands are going to want to know their sales, margin, stock, maybe even like digital information when it comes to how many users have actually visited their products and the site. So we got a good idea of what was going to be in the products that we're going to deliver. We then started talking about interactivity. Instead of having to send just a spreadsheet, which they can then ingest into their own processes, can we actually provide something that they've got a bit of control over? This right in Power BI's wheelhouse, isn't it? Giving them all the slices, they can dive down to the numbers that they want instead of having to do all the manual work for them. A variety of layouts. Not everyone wants to see a report in the same way. Someone might want to see headline numbers. Someone might want a table full of numbers, down to more granular detail. Someone might want to see a trend graph instead. So it was all about the design, what we were going to include in it, what we thought the brands would like to see. Refresh weekly. So this was sort of to put an end to the cadence issues. We're just going to say, right, this is going to be weekly reporting. This is the cadence that we want to get out of the suppliers. And also a comprehensive glossary. And can sometimes be overlooked. I know I've overlooked it in the past, where actually knowing what all those metrics mean, one company might call something completely different. We have a metric called demand. Demand can be many things across many areas of different companies. We use demand to say, when someone has actually initially demanded a product from us on our website, for instance. So we had a bit of a sit round as a BI team. We started doing a little bit of planning. We started sort of drawing out what we thought was going to be the solution to this. And obviously, we came across some implementation issues. So these are the things we thought we were going to have to sort of overcome. So creating and maintaining reports for multiple brands. We could maybe send this out to 5 or 6 brands to start off with as a proof of concept, which is what we intended to do. But what happens when we're out to 200, 500 brands? Producing that many reports and obviously having everything to support that going out and supporting the user base, it was potentially going to be an issue. Implementing changes and scheduling updates, again, a vast number of reports. The more we had, the more that would end up being an issue. Potential scalability, again, we can start off with 10 brands. That might be easy, sending 10 emails out on a Monday morning, or even, having an automation send 10 reports out. What happens when it gets up to X number of brands? There's a lot of brands on again, go on the website, it's great. But yeah, the potential scalability of it. And then sharing the reports and managing access, as Dan mentioned, the idea of this was to actually allow access through Active Directory. So that included, bringing on guest accounts, making sure that people can actually access these reports. So that was also going to be an issue. And then potential for human error. Again, you can't really get away from this when you are talking about things like this with multiple reports. There is a potential for something to go wrong because of human error. And then admin overhead, which ties it all nicely together to say that there's essentially a lot of human effort that needed to go into this as far as admin overhead. So then it came to the solution, and this is where the fun stuff happens. So the solution and what we landed on was actually having a single report. There's one report that we would produce. It would be created using a supported set of data, and then we'd be using row level security and user groups to actually make this report available to the wider users. So obviously we would use within the modeling tab, you've got the manage roles section. So the idea here was that we were going to create a role on this report for each brand that wanted to access the report. And that would be based on like a sub-brand filter. So for each group, there would be a number of sub-brands. So if you imagine us as the Very group, we have like Very Men's, we've got Very Home, we've got Be by various brands. They would all be sort of rolled together into one group. We would then pull it to the Power BI service. We decided to put it in its own app within the Power BI service. And realistically, that just gives us potential for the future. We could brand that app, we could put extra things into that app to make sure that it's a bit more outward focused rather than just being another one of the corporate reports that we use. So again, a bit more focus for the future there. We would then give the external users access. So this was through an existing process that we've already got with the IT team, where we can set up third-party accounts, guest accounts, and then once they're set up, we can then assign each of those users to an Active Directory group, and then all together, those Active Directory groups will be assigned to the user groups that have been created in the Power BI report itself. So realistically, that took us from having potentially a stack of 200 reports that we're trying to send out on a Monday morning or whenever it might be, to a single report that we can maintain, we can develop it, it's nice and clean, all the main information in there that the brands need, and all they need to do is log on and they can see their stuff. No danger of night logging on and seeing Adidas sales and things like that. It's all controlled. And then last but not least, training the brand users. So making sure that they were able to log on and making sure they were able to use the report, just giving them a bit of steer as to what the report does. So the solution notwithstanding, there were definitely some challenges that came along the way. And a lot of this is what Dan said before about not just how the report was created in Power BI itself, but what we had to go through as a company and as a team within the company to get this working. So internal sign-off was a big part of this, and there was a lot of pre-meetings before we even agreed to take on the work. So we had legal sign-off. Obviously, are we contractually allowed to share the information with the brands? Each of the brands that we onboard has got different legal terms, different contractual terms. Are we actually allowed to share data in this way? It could be a brand that we took on many, many years ago under a different brand. So obviously we had to get that sign-off done. Security sign-off. Are we happy that they can access the data and also that access to the data is sufficiently controlled with the existing processes, or whether we have to pull in additional processes, making sure that, as I said before, that someone from Adidas can't log on and just see everything in that report, which obviously we wouldn't really want to be sharing. There was an IT sign-off. Did we have the procedures in place? I mentioned third-party guest access. Is that sufficient? Do we have the appropriate levels of authentication in there as well? So one thing we did have to do was mandate multi-factor authentication. So everyone has to jump through the Microsoft Authenticator app hoops to get onto the system. And lastly on there, we had the data team sign off. So were we as a data team and a wider data team happy with the structure, roles, security concepts and user groups that have been sufficiently tested to make sure that, as I said before, no data gets leaked or shared to the wrong people. So we then had the brand rollout and the testing itself. One of the big questions on there is how many users are we actually expecting on here. We initially went out to 6 brands. Between those 6 brands, I think the number of users ranged from 3 up to about 22 individuals for one brand that wanted to access this report. Obviously, trying to manage that and make sure the admin overhead's taken care of. We then had the relationship with the external users. Were we going to do that? At the very start of it, we agreed to do that as part of the proof of concepts. If we went further on, what would that service wrap look like? Tracking usage of the report. Obviously you've got the standard Power BI usage tracking tools, which we've learned on quite a lot for this, but with the profile of this, do we need to have something a bit more bespoke? Is there something that needs to be monitored a little bit more? And then initial feedback from users was a really key one. Obviously, initial feedback as to what we thought of it, but also feedback as to what they would like to see from the product going forward if it was being developed further. And that brought us on to continued development. So, collating one of the main drawbacks with this model that we decided to use was that we're getting all of these additional requirements coming in from so many different people, so many different brands. They all have different priorities and want to see different data. How do we decide what we're actually going to include in the report, which can be sort of digested amongst the entire user community? That's exactly what I've just said. Yeah, let's go on to the next bit. And then obviously the ongoing admin. So having everything set up, having everything working both internally and as a product going forward. So the results. Well, good news, it was a successful rollout. So we did do the rollout of the base products. It was very successful. We had great feedback from the brands, a real appetite for additional functionality. They were all really keen to see the product grow. Really consistent levels of usage. I think we went live in June this year on this with the beta version. We've had consistent usage every single week. At least 1 or 2 members of each of the brands has logged on. They are incorporating this into their own processes for reporting within the companies. Minimal incidents. I say minimal. Obviously, there's never no incidents, are there? So regarding quality and access, data quality, we only had 1 minor blip, which was fine. Access, to be honest, depended a lot on the company and whether they were used to things like multi-factor authentication. You know, have they got that set up? Are they used to logging on in that way? And things like this. Some of them just needed a bit more hand-holding to get through that. And then solid engagement from internal colleagues as well. Not only were we aiming for this to solve a lot of external reporting issues, we also wanted real solid engagement from our internal community as well. And to be honest, we had really good internal feedback. There were a lot of people who started saying, "Oh, can we actually use this for our brands? You know, when's the next rollout going to be? Can we start getting involved and can we support this initiative?" Which is really good. And that brings us on to the future. You know, what could this product deliver? What do we intend to do with it? As I said, lots of interest, both internally and externally. So there were other brands that sort of caught wind of what we were doing, and they said, you know, that sounds like a brilliant concept. We'd love to get involved in that. Capacity planning, so was always going to be an issue. Again, it is only 1 report, but even 1 report being accessed 1,000 times is really going to hammer the capacity on Power BI. So what needs to be put in place for that? Using audience functionality. Now this was a thing that we're really quite interested in looking into further. Obviously, using audience functionality, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, whereby you can actually control which version of a report a user sees, or we might be able to have like a tiered approach to reporting. So we can give them a free one, and then if they want to bung some money our way, we can give them a better one. So yeah, everybody wins. Allowing export functionality, the swear word in the room when it comes to a lot of our reporting. Can we just have the data? And initially, this was just it was turned off by design, so that you couldn't just bung the data into a spreadsheet, which we were obviously trying to move away from a little bit. And obviously, future iterations of the report. So yes, we've got a report with a lot of data behind it. It's sitting on a bespoke data set at the moment, which supports the report itself. But long term, we would love for it to sit on a more centrally supported data model. And that is a perfect segue to go into the data lab. Because there is going to be, hopefully, at some point, we'll be able to base this report on the data lab, which Paul's going to come and explain to you now.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Paul Ewan, and I'm going to talk about the data labs that we've developed. So one of the things we wanted to do is sort of create access to a common set of data for us internally as a team to use, and then eventually became my wider teams as well. So first thing we want to talk about is, I guess, what is a data lab in the context of what we're doing in the business. So I guess pretty simply, it's a data-driven PBIMCR file, but without any visuals. And what we want to put in here is a mechanism for updating this data lab in an existing way, so that it can then feed other reports. So with the PBIMCR, what we can then do is link reports that we build directly to it. And what this sort of allows us to do is have one data refresh each day, rather than multiple reports all pulling the same data in and then taking longer time to publish them. Keeps the report sizes down as well, because there's no data stored in any linked reports. And like I said, the main goal we get from it is one refresh each day. That's it. We'll talk about the size and how we do the refreshes. And the other big benefit we get from sort of these linked reports is one common set of data. So it's the same data. So if someone wants demand, everyone will get the same demand. And also common language as well between all the reports. So when we talk about demand, if you use our cost reports or any measures that we've got in there, we have the glossaries to go alongside the names, and then hopefully we have that common language in the business, which we don't always get as well. So one of the reasons we wanted to use this data lab is because we want to do this idea of counter stinks. So I'm going to use customers as an example. So when we built a lot of our initial reports in the business, we used to aggregate everything up. Summing up demand is quite easy from a metric point of view in DAX. But when we want to do counter stinks, we sort of come into problems where you might have one customer shop multiple departments or across multiple weeks. So when you kind of just sum up, sort of, if you had one customer in all 52 weeks of the year, you kind of just sum up the 52 weeks to give 52 customers, because it's still one distinct customer at the end of it. So the way we solved this was bringing in the low-level data to allow us just to do it distinct in the DAX. But we've also got 4 million rows of data in the whole data lab, with the main tables, 350 million rows. So when we built this, we want to sort of make sure that everything works well, I guess, so that it's fast. We don't want to just aggregate it up into a simple report where it's not usable for the teams because it slows down. So I was going to say, I had one example on there just of the customers as well. So we had 500 million customers across them 2 departments, whereas in reality, if you're doing the counter stink, it's only just under 400,000 customers. So if we wanted to aggregate them up as well, one of the things we considered before we actually brought in them 400 million rows of data was sort of the idea of cubing the data, aggregated up, sort of creating a table that is sort of got all the combinations already built for us. But building that cube data set is quite a resource intensive process as well. I'll say, just for an example, we've got about 100,000 different lines, so products that we sell. And if you sort of took them 100,000 products, we've got 3 brands that we sell on across 52 weeks. That's 15 million rows straight away that we need to do a count distinct for. So when you sort of look at all of our measures that we have in dimensions in this model, I think we have about 50 different dimensions, and creating that cube data set doesn't allow us to easily sort of integrate with the Power BI. So bringing 400 million rows actually worked out easier for us in the long term. And that's what I'm going to talk about for the rest of it, what that process about how we manage the data lab and bringing them 400 million rows. So what we want is sort of we must perform quickly. We also need it to be quick to update. So as part of this, we're going to use incremental refresh. So we don't want to update 400 million rows every single day. And then finally, when we want to make changes to the model, so if we want to change the metrics, we want to allow us to make them changes without sort of having to reload all 400 million rows. So just before going with, so our data lab at the moment is about 20 gig in size for them 400 million rows. We've got 39 tables, 307 columns. At the moment, we've got about 4,000 individual measures in the data lab, which I say, when we originally conceived this one, having 4,000 measures seemed like quite an impossible task to work with, but we've made it work. So just going through what we actually do in the data lab then and how we set them up. The first thing we want to do is actually turn on the incremental sort of refresh. And what this is going to allow us to do is do an initial data load of the bulk of that 400 million rows, and then each day just update sort of that handful of rows. So each day, I think it's about 50 million rows we update. Probably a bit less than that. But we end up with a refresh that takes 20 minutes each day, rather than having to load in the 400 million rows. So what we start off with in Power BI is setting up a set of parameters, which, I say, for incremental refresh, you normally start with your range start, range end. In terms of the builds for this one, we have in the desktop app, what we don't have to do also is bring in 400 million rows. So we set up this parameter called filter rows, which I normally use 100,000, and that's just going to bring in a sample of data. So when we run on the desktop version, we use that parameter, bring in 100,000 rows, but then we're going to, when we upload it to the service, set that parameter to a value of 0, which then forces it in the service to bring in the whole data set. was going to say, just probably not the easiest to read, but just using the query part of the desktop app, we sort of set a very simple if statement, fill the rows less than or equal to 0, bring in the whole data set. If it's not equal to 0, we bring in a sample, and that sample is equal to that primary filter rows. So it allows us to run the desktop app with a good sample of data to build and make sure we're doing any testing on the metrics and stuff like that before we load it into the service. And this also works with a query folder as well. So when you actually have in the service, all of the incremental stuff works correctly. And then we just set up on the table that we need to, and we don't do it on every table, we only do it on the big hitters. So we've got that 50 million row and the 50 million rows tables. We set up this incremental refresh to bring in about 3 years worth of history, and then we incrementally refresh the last 5 days each day. And I say at the moment that's taking us about 20 minutes to run, which I say runs early in the morning, ready in time for the business to access it. So we've now sort of set up our desktop app, set up the queries, we've brought all the data in and modelled it all. What we then want to do is load it to the service and sort of do the initial load of that 400 million rows of data. So we should only need to do this once. So we've loaded the model into the service, and then we set in the service the parameters to 0. And that is now going to do, whenever we run it, it's going to do a full refresh. But we don't want to do the full refresh all at once when we first load it in the service. And part of the reason for that is we have timeout issues. So our Teradata box that we load the data from only has a 2-hour window where we can download the data. 400 million rows, I think, if we run it all at once, I think would take us about 8 or 10 hours to run through, which falls out like 2 hours, and also Power BI has a 5-hour limit as well. So we need to do it in sort of stages. So we use Tabular Editor for this. So in Tabular Editor, we go in, once we've loaded the model up, and before we do that initial refresh, we set this up, the apply refresh policy. And this forces the table to create the partitions where it's going to store the data. And that's based on what we set up in the desktop on the incremental. So we sort of, for this one, we're doing it by month. And I say you get don't think names it the mostly because it prefixes everything with Q rather than M. But yeah, you get 12 months, and then the current month is split into days. So when we do that incremental refresh for 5 days, it'll show up each of them partitions. And what this is going to allow us to eventually do is then go through and update these each of these partitions separately so that we don't fall foul of that 2-hour limit from our Teradata box. And once we've done that for each of our tables, we just click the refresh button in Power BI in the service, and that'll go and bring in that first 5. It'll apply the 5 days incremental refresh without pulling in all 400 million rows. So what we end up with at this point is a data lab which has 5 days in, no history at the moment, but it's all set up. And if we left that running, it would just update 5 days each day. So we then move on to SQL Server Management Studio, which we're now going to use to apply data into each of them partitions. So within SQL Server Management Studio, we can sort of go into the individual tables. So we do this on each table. We can view the partitions. So when we initially ran this one, we were at the 5 days in there. So let's say that's about 30,000 rows a day. And what we end up with in the partitions is sort of 0 data in. What we can do now is just select a set of these. And when we do that, we can select the things we want. I normally do 4 or 5. I think that normally runs within an hour or so, which is fine for the 2-hour window. We apply a process full, which just refreshes all the data and refreshes the model. And then what we end up with is eventually going through each of them, sort of the 400 million rows into the Power BI data set. And then what we can do is start building reports from it. And that puts us in a good place to start building reports. But there's one of the states that we end up having to use quite a lot is we might need to change a measure or slightly change some of the queries sort of import steps. So what we can use now is the LM toolkit, which allows us to sort of sync any metadata changes from the desktop app back to the service and stops us having to reload that 400 million rows of data. So we can just go into this tool, it analyzes the desktop version versus the version in the service, and just put one example on the screen and just made a simple change and what the expression looked like. It identifies what that looks like. You can check which ones you want to sync across, and then when you just click the validate and then update, and that takes about a minute. So I was making some changes last week, and I think we did about 200 new measures in there, and it took about a minute to sync them across. And once it's synced across, it's got access to them 400 million rows of data, and we don't have to do any sort of data refreshes at that point. Them new measures are in there straight away. So it's a really useful sort of set of tools to allow us to manage the data labs without having to reload it every time we make a simple change. So we've now got this, it's been up and running for about 6 months now. We've started to use it for our own internal reporting, but we've also rolled it out to some of the wider teams in the business who can do their own reporting with it and also do ad hoc reporting as well. But just a couple of examples of ones that we've done recently. So Ellie, who's here tonight as well, built a Black Friday report recently off the data lab. And I think one of the big usefulnesses of it is the data's there, the measures are all set up, the glossary's there. You don't have to work out how to combine all our data sets together yourself and sort of build your own Power BI report. You can just link straight to the model, you've got the data there. And Ellie did a fabulous job. This way I've got rolled out to the business and we used all in the 4 weeks leading up to Black Friday, and that's here this week as well. And that's Dan, who has also built another report, the brand plan report, which goes out to the teams in the business. And this is another report again that we've worked quite hard with the teams to make sure that it's delivering a lot of value to them. So this is giving them, like I said, there's a lot of metrics in here. There's one page I think we have 70 measures on, which I say one of the big things we get from this, and one of the big things we want to make sure it worked well is that the refreshers work, or that when you're loading up the data, it loads quick. And I think this one here, I'd say, loads in less than a second, so it's really good. So yeah, so it's just a quick whistle-stop tour, I guess, of what we're doing within the data lab space. And I say this was our trading one. We're going to start working in digital soon, and yeah. So I'm going to pass back to Dan.
Okay, great. So thanks to Dan and Paul for giving us an overview there. So what does the future hold? And we've kind of alluded to this already, but just by way of summary. So for the external sharing piece, what's become really clear in our process of going through this is you do have to have a good support, like business support model behind it, to manage partners' requirements, to manage the admin overhead of setting people up in AD groups, all that kind of thing. And that all needs to be funded. So my boss is very keen on making this kind of a revenue generating model. So we'll see where that goes. But what is clear is we need kind of a supportive model. It's not something that you can really do side of the desk, at least in terms of partners, like business partners who you're trying to keep happy. And then as far as the data lab concept goes, what we want to do, like Paul mentioned, we want to build kind of multiple of these large semantic models. The next one we're looking at is digital, which is going to be even more than 400 million rows probably. But I think it's proved its worth in terms of we've been able to get access to certain metrics that we weren't able to do in Power BI, kind of these unique account metrics. And also report at a level of granularity that hasn't been possible in the business before. Also, it's going to lay the foundation for a kind of a truly self-serve business where people, not just us, we don't become the bottleneck anymore. Anyone in the business can plug into into Power BI, open it up, create the ravines, and dare I say it, using the as an Excel function as well. So that's where we're looking to go. Obviously, you know, there's other things that we're working on, but I think these two things show a lot of promise and a lot of value. And that's us, I think. Thank you very much.